Right now, without touching a single muscle, your body is running a hydraulic system more precise than anything in a modern factory. Valves opening, pressure building, nerves firing thousands of signals a second, coordinating a process so complex that entire fields of medicine exist just to study when it breaks down. You were never taught this. Nobody sat you down and explained that arousal is not an emotion. It is engineering. It is fluid dynamics, wrapped in a nervous system, wrapped in a story your brain tells itself about safety. So let's start with the part nobody explains correctly. Erection, lubrication, arousal itself. These are not switches. They are the output of a pressure differential. Blood vessels in erectile tissue are lined with smooth muscle, and that smooth muscle is normally contracted, holding those vessels tight and narrow. Arousal is the process of that smooth muscle relaxing on command, allowing blood to rush in faster than it can drain out. The tissue swells, pressure rises, function follows structure, exactly the way it does in a dam holding back a river, or a garden hose the moment you crimp it and then release. When men experience what's clinically called erectile dysfunction, the story that culture tells is about desire, about attraction, about masculinity. The actual story, in the vast majority of cases, is about this valve system failing to open on command. The smooth muscle doesn't relax properly. The blood vessels don't dilate the way they should. It is closer to a plumbing problem than a psychological one, even though the two are deeply entangled, which we'll get to. Here's the chemical key that unlocks the whole system. Nitric oxide. This is a gas, a genuinely tiny molecule, and it is the signal that tells smooth muscle to let go. It diffuses into the muscle cells, lining those blood vessels, and triggers a cascade that ends with relaxation, with dilation, with blood flooding in. This is not exclusive to any one sex. The same basic nitric oxide-driven vasodilation happens in female arousal, engorging tissue, increasing blood flow to the vaginal walls, and triggering the process that produces natural lubrication through fluid pressing through the vaginal lining. Different anatomy, same underlying chemistry, same underlying law. Nitric oxide relaxes smooth muscle. Smooth muscle relaxation increases blood flow. Increased blood flow is the physical substrate of arousal. When nitric oxide production is impaired by poor cardiovascular health, by certain medications, by nerve damage, by chronic high blood sugar, quietly scarring the small vessels over years, the entire cascade stalls out before it starts. You can want something with your entire conscious mind, and your vascular system simply won't cooperate because desire and hydraulics are controlled by two different departments that don't always answer each other's calls. Now, here's where it gets stranger. Your body runs two competing electrical networks that were never designed to be at war, and yet in the entire domain of sexual function, they are constantly fighting for control. The parasympathetic nervous system is the rest and digest network. Calm, low alert, the state your body defaults to when it believes it is safe. It is the network responsible for triggering that nitric oxide release, for opening the valves, for allowing arousal to build. The sympathetic nervous system is the opposite. It is the fight-or-flight network, the one that floods you with adrenaline, that redirects blood away from reproductive tissue and toward your muscles. Because 200,000 years ago, an aroused human standing still was a human about to become a meal for something with teeth. Evolution did not design your body to feel desire and danger simultaneously. It designed those two states to be mutually exclusive on a biological level, at the level of which nerve pathway is currently dominant. This is the part that reframes almost every sexual difficulty a person will ever experience. Stress is not a vague, abstract feeling that happens to interfere with intimacy. Stress is your sympathetic nervous system actively, physically suppressing the exact vascular mechanism required for arousal to occur. When you're anxious about a work deadline, when you're worried about your performance in the very moment you're trying to be present, when your body reads any signal internal or external as a threat, your sympathetic system fires, your blood vessels constrict instead of dilate, and the hydraulic system that was supposed to build pressure instead shuts the valve. This is why performance anxiety is not just a psychological inconvenience layered on top of the real physical problem. In the language of the nervous system, the anxiety is a direct physiological antagonist to the exact mechanism required for the response to happen at all. You are not fighting a mental block. You are fighting your own sympathetic nervous system, and it is, biologically speaking, built to win that fight. Because a body under threat that pauses to reproduce is a body that loses the evolutionary game. Consider what this means for the person lying awake at 3 in the morning, wondering what is wrong with them. Nothing dramatic is wrong with them. Their nervous system is doing exactly what 400 million years of vertebrate evolution built it to do, prioritizing survival signaling over reproductive signaling every single time, without exception, without negotiation. The tragedy is that modern life manufactures an almost constant, low-grade sympathetic activation, notification pings, financial anxiety, sleep deprivation, the ambient hum of always being reachable. And that low-grade activation is more than enough to keep the parasympathetic gate closed night after night, without the person ever consciously registering why. Let's follow the chemical trail one layer deeper, because underneath the nervous system sits an even older, slower-moving control system, the endocrine system, and specifically, the hormone that gets blamed for almost everything and understood by almost no one, cortisol. Cortisol is not a villain. It's a survival hormone, released by the adrenal glands in response to any perceived threat. And its entire job is to mobilize the body for an emergency that, for most of human evolutionary history, meant something was actively trying to kill you. Cortisol raises blood sugar for quick energy, sharpens short-term alertness, and critically, for our purposes, actively suppresses the release of gonadotropin-releasing hormone, the master hormone that kicks off the entire reproductive hormonal cascade in both sexes. In simple terms, cortisol tells the brain, this is not the time for reproduction. This is the time for survival. Shut that system down until the threat passes. In a world of genuine short-term dangers, this made perfect sense. The threat would resolve, cortisol would drop, and the reproductive system would come back online within hours. The problem is that modern chronic stress never resolves. It doesn't spike and drop. It hovers, day after day, month after month, keeping cortisol elevated on a semi-permanent basis. And chronically elevated cortisol does something specific and measurable. It suppresses testosterone production in men by directly interfering with the signaling pathway between the brain and the testes, and it disrupts the delicate rhythm of estrogen and progesterone cycling in women, which can suppress libido, alter arousal response, and in some cases disrupt the menstrual cycle itself. This is not speculation. This is documented endocrinology. People experiencing chronically low libido are, in a significant number of cases, walking around with a hormonal profile that looks like a body perpetually bracing for an attack that never quite arrives and never quite leaves, either stuck in a permanent, low-grade defensive crouch, reproductive priorities pushed to the very bottom of the list because the ancient part of the brain calling the shots does not know the difference between a predator and a mortgage payment. Now overlay the second hormonal axis onto this picture. The reward and motivation system, driven primarily by dopamine. Desire, the wanting, the craving, the pull toward another person is not generated in the reproductive organs. It is generated in a cluster of ancient midbrain structures, particularly the ventral tegmental area, which releases dopamine into reward circuitry in response to anticipated pleasure. This is the exact same circuitry involved in wanting food when you're hungry, wanting a substance during addiction, wanting anything the brain has flagged as valuable. Intimate desire is a specific application of a very general-purpose motivational system, and like every other function of that system, it can be blunted. Chronic stress lowers dopamine sensitivity over time. Certain medications, particularly some antidepressants that affect serotonin, can flatten dopamine signaling as a side effect, which is precisely why reduced interest in intimacy is one of the most common reported side effects of that entire drug class. Depression itself, clinically, is often defined partly by anhedonia, a blunting of the capacity to feel pleasure and desire across the board, intimate interest included, because it's all running through the same dopaminergic circuitry. This is the piece that reframes reduced interest in intimacy away from something is wrong with you as a person, and toward a measurable neurochemical circuit is currently running at reduced output. It is not a referendum on a relationship, or on attraction, or on love. Sometimes it's a spreadsheet of hormone levels and neurotransmitter turnover rates that would explain the entire pattern to a clinician in about 4 minutes if anyone bothered to run the panel. Here's where the story gets genuinely elegant, in the way that well-designed feedback loops always do, even the cruel ones. The nervous system and the anxiety response don't just block a normal physical response from starting. They can disrupt the process after it's already begun, creating a specific, well-documented feedback loop that shows up constantly in clinical literature on intimacy-related health concerns. It works like this. A person begins experiencing a normal physiological response. The parasympathetic system engages. Blood flow increases, and then a single anxious thought intrudes. Am I going to lose this? Is this going to happen again, like last time? The moment that thought fires, the sympathetic nervous system activates in response to the anxiety itself. Blood vessels constrict, the physical response weakens or fades, and the person's fear is instantly confirmed by their own body's real-time physiological response to that very fear. The anxiety doesn't just predict the outcome. The anxiety causes the outcome in real time through a direct autonomic nervous system pathway. And then the unsuccessful outcome generates more anxiety for the next attempt, and the loop tightens with each repetition. Clinicians call elements of this pattern performance anxiety, but the more accurate description is a self-reinforcing autonomic feedback loop, where the fear of sympathetic activation literally triggers the sympathetic activation that produces the feared result. It is one of the cleanest examples in all of human physiology of a thought becoming a measurable, mechanical, vascular event within seconds. Now let's zoom out from moment-to-moment nervous system activity to the slower, structural axis, the physical aging of the vascular system itself, because this is where a huge share of intimacy-related health problems in older adults actually originates, and it rarely gets explained honestly. The blood vessels involved in normal physiological responses are small. They're some of the smallest, most delicate vessels in the entire circulatory system, which makes them exquisitely sensitive to anything that degrades vascular health more broadly. This is why certain intimate health changes are now understood in modern medicine as possible. Early warning signs of cardiovascular disease sometimes appearing years before a heart attack or stroke, because these small vessels can show the strain of arterial stiffening and plaque buildup before the larger vessels feeding the heart do. High blood pressure damages the delicate inner lining of these vessels, called the endothelium, which is the exact tissue responsible for producing nitric oxide in the first place. Chronic high blood sugar from unmanaged diabetes does direct damage to small nerve fibers and small blood vessels simultaneously, which is why diabetes is one of the single strongest risk factors for sexual dysfunction across the medical literature, affecting both the nerve signaling and the vascular response at once. Smoking constricts blood vessels directly and accelerates arterial stiffening over years. None of these mechanisms are mysterious once you understand the underlying hydraulic principle from the beginning of this video. If arousal fundamentally depends on smooth, elastic, responsive small blood vessels dilating on command, then anything that stiffens, narrows, or damages those vessels throughout the body will show up first, and most visibly, in exactly this system, because these vessels have the least structural margin for error. Aging itself, independent of disease, gradually reduces nitric oxide production, gradually stiffens vascular tissue, and in women, the dramatic hormonal shift of menopause, the sharp decline in estrogen directly reduces blood flow to vaginal tissue and thins the vaginal lining, producing the dryness and discomfort reported by a majority of postmenopausal women, a direct, mechanical, hormonally driven tissue change rather than any kind of psychological shift in desire. Estrogen, it turns out, is not just a reproductive hormone. It is a maintenance hormone for the entire local vascular and tissue structure involved in arousal. And when it drops, the physical infrastructure changes along with it, in a way that is fully explainable through basic endocrinology, rather than mystery or stigma. So where does that leave us with a system this fragile, this interconnected, this dependent on the precise coordination of nervous system state, hormone levels, vascular health, and psychological safety, all having to align simultaneously just to produce what culture treats as a simple, automatic biological given? The honest answer from the research is not despair. It's precision, because every single mechanism we've walked through in this video is measurable, and in most cases, modifiable. Cardiovascular exercise directly improves endothelial function and nitric oxide production, which is why it shows up so consistently in clinical studies as one of the single most effective interventions for vascular-based sexual dysfunction, sometimes rivaling medication in its measured effect size. Sleep directly regulates cortisol rhythm and testosterone production, which is produced predominantly during deep sleep cycles, meaning chronic sleep deprivation is, mechanically, a chronic low testosterone intervention that most people are running on themselves without realizing it. Managing chronic stress lowers baseline cortisol and allows the parasympathetic nervous system to actually gain the upper hand it needs to initiate the process in the first place, and directly interrupting the anxiety feedback loop, often through structured behavioral techniques used in clinical sex therapy that deliberately remove performance pressure from the equation, has been shown repeatedly to break the self-reinforcing cycle we described earlier. Because once the sympathetic trigger is removed, the parasympathetic system is finally free to do the job it was built for. What this entire picture reveals, underneath all of it, is that sexual function was never really about desire, as a standalone force floating free of the rest of the body. It's a downstream readout, a final report card generated by cardiovascular health, nervous system balance, hormonal rhythm, sleep, and psychological safety, all reporting their status simultaneously through one shared physical mechanism. When that mechanism falters, it is not a verdict on a person's worth, their relationship, or their identity. It is data. It is the body, with total honesty, telling you exactly which underlying system needs attention if you know how to read the report.